Wonderful, 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 wonderful. What a wonderful world. Good morning, everyone. Why am I streaming? I don't know. It's probably dumb, probably a waste of time, but fuck it. I mean, screw it. I don't know. You're not supposed to say the F word on YouTube anymore. It's nice outside today. Been nice all week, really. I'm gonna go outside later after I learn about this stuff. Anyways, I've been working on a project to use as an interview piece, as an interview example of like what I can do coding. And I've gotten like 4 weeks into it. Posted a question on a forum about one little piece of it, one little button I was working on. And you want to know the response I got? Stop everything you're doing. Throw this project away and start all the way over on it using this thing called a static site generator instead. And this is not the first time. I've been 4 or 5 weeks into working on something. And by the way, it's a challenge. It's an online. Anybody can build this. They just describe it and you come up with the code yourself, basically. And the way they list it, I think I can show you. Hold on. The way they list it here, this is it right here. It's this thing. Okay, this is what it looks like. Hold on. Of course, they don't give you any fucking pictures when I try to show it to you, but anyway, this is it. Now it is an advanced level 1, but I've been doing these languages for a while now, so that's why I'm doing it. And guess what? It just says JS here. It does not say you need what is called a static site generator in order to do this. It says you can do it in JS, right? Does that say JS right there on the page? Am I crazy, or do those two letters read J and S, as in JavaScript? Well, find out 4 or 5 weeks later that I'm into it. Guess what? You can't just build it with JS. You got to use a static site generator. And this is what I've built so far. And you can search on it. You can say, I only want Japan. Boom, there's your Japan. You know, I only want Japan full-time. Boom, there's your Japan full-time. All this stuff I just had to think up, like how to do it. Which is how you learn. And it's not easy, of course. And then also, of course, it's responsive. So when you're in mobile, there's no blank here. You got a little pop-out thing, and you fill this out instead. And you search from here, okay? And then you got this little load more. You have to put that in there. It was a lot of work. And then I'm being told, guess what, guy? Throw it all away. This close. I thought I had this one last thing to do, which was to make this, like when you click on one, it leads you to another page that, of course, describes the job, and you have the files for that, for each job. And I thought I was there. I thought I was basically there. And then I would have this in my pocket, and I could just go do some interviews and be like, look, I can make all this stuff. Nope. Time to learn another language. Time to throw all of this shit away. All of this 4 weeks worth of work based, again, on this on their website, which does not say anything about needing a I love how they don't give you any pictures here. That's so helpful. Anyways, so this is a lie right here. You can't just build it with these. You need a static site generator. I mean, technically you can, but on their forum here, I don't know why I'm explaining this. You guys don't even care, but I'm just telling you where I'm coming from. This is the forum where the people for that site talk to you. And yeah, they tell me I need a fucking static site generator to stop what I'm doing. I think it is not massively useful to help to continue plugging away at this. Thanks. 4 weeks down the line. Thanks. So now I am researching for the first time static site generators and figuring out, taking notes on it. And in all honesty, it is a tool I need to know, but like I thought with those 3 languages I could actually get into some interviews. So now I'm just getting a general introduction to it first here. I don't know how, if I'm going to need to take a Udemy course on it, like get that in depth with it, or what, because I've never used one before. I don't know what it is. I don't even really understand what it is.
Sends it to the database, and the database does something with that, and then it sends it back to the user, and then it allows them to have some sort of dynamic relationship to where it's changing. But there's some major downsides to this way of thinking when it comes to the original dynamic websites. And I'm going to show you a slide here real quick. So this slide shows one of the common uses of a dynamic website. You can see that the user here, or the laptop, it requests something from the server, and instead of getting something immediately back, the server uses a server language called PHP to actually go out and, using an extension, grab files from the file system, grab data from a database, generate that web page, and send it right back to the client. Which you might be thinking, oh, well, that's what I wanted. I wanted to be able to have a database full of users and accounts, and I wanted a file system to store files and pictures. And, I wanted all sorts of things separated. That way I don't have to rewrite all my code, which is great. But this brings me to 2 major factors that really that can cripple your website. And that's, the first one is speed. Now, in today's day and age, time is money. And when you're trying to load a website...
Amen, brother. Fucking man. This guy knows.
You have to wait more than 3 seconds, and you typically leave that website. I know I do personally. Now,
this guy's not fucking around.
Why is this a big problem with this?
Time is money,
with this
my
setup,
guy.
with this dynamic website? Well, every time that you have to build that web page, every time PHP has to go through the extensions and go through the database, that's adding more and more time. So that's just a huge factor of like, I don't want to be on that website because it adds more time. And with all these different parts in there, this brings me to my next big point, is there's lots of breaking points. The more points of exchange is the more points of breakage. What do I mean by this? Well, typically your server doesn't have to have all of that stuff on it. And just because it does have all that stuff on it doesn't mean it's not being run by 3 separate entities. Your database could be running in SQLite, and your file system could be a big storage center, and your actual server is sitting someplace else. And if one thing goes down, all of it goes down. So the more points of failure is with every single system.
Okay.
So how did we get away from this? How did we solve this problem? Because we just haven't lived with this problem.
I'm not
We
really
always
sure what the
solve
problem
problems,
was.
right? Well, this is where a couple things come in. And one of the biggest things was JavaScript.
What?
JavaScript changed the world, actually. It's a language that does the same stuff on the server.
In today's day and age, it did?
Manipulating data and changing results and stuff like that it would do on the server, but it actually runs client side on your laptop, on your phone, on your desktop. Now, this is thanks to, for this, you can make your websites feel dynamic thanks to some frameworks called jQuery, Angular, React. Those are some really popular ones. There's thousands of them out there, but they're all built using JavaScript.
Okay.
And this makes your what was before your static sites very dynamic, in the sense that while you're still writing all your code by hand, it's now very responsive. Things change, things update, all that stuff, right? Just using this JavaScript doesn't make the static part any less static. It just adds dynamic to the web. Using this JavaScript doesn't make the responsive. Things change, things update, all that stuff, right? Just using this JavaScript doesn't make the static part any less static. It's
just using, say that again.
All that stuff, right? Just using this JavaScript doesn't make...
Just using this JavaScript doesn't make the static part any less static. Uddy. I don't know what that fucking means.
Any less static. It just adds dynamic to the website. So what's going to solve our problem of having to rewrite all of our code and have to refactor it constantly? See, JavaScript made it a lot easier to make sites more reactive, but developers made the jump from dynamic sites to static sites. What gave them that jump to come back? Well, that's something called static site generate.
I'm trying to understand what he's describing. It makes it sound like we started with just not dynamic, meaning like not interactive pages. Then JavaScript came along, made pages dynamic, meaning interactive, I guess, for lack of a better word for it. But that sort of made things complicated to the point where we need them to be it basically introduced more points of failure, I guess. That you'd have to be monitoring more shit. With a whole bunch of plugins and shit. And that wasn't the issue with static sites, because static is just, you're here and then you go. It's just literally a file on a server being displayed on a website. I mean, being displayed on your screen, basically, in the browser. It's a straight shot. Versus dynamic, like he showed, goes static information on a page, but it's interactive, so it talks to, what are we, 520? Hold on. Yeah. So this stuff holds, like, these servers hold HTML pages, CSS pages, and JavaScript pages. The person gets on the website here, searches something, say, that search query is picked up by JavaScript. JavaScript says run a search in this backend database using PHP. Basically, there's a long chain of potential fail points. This is dynamic, interactive sites. A static site would basically stop here. So there's less fail points, is the gist I'm getting from it. And so we made this possible. But now what a static site generator does is to retain all of this happening, but to serve it up in a way that makes it seem like it's just this. Is how I'm understanding it. So I'm also taking notes here, because I don't know what any of this fucking shit is. In fact, I'm going to take a screenshot. Noonie. Screenshots are so based and red pilled. Hold on. Also, let me reformat this so I can actually read what I'm reading. Okay. Let's get rid of the margins. We don't need the fucking margins. We're not making a legal document. I'm just taking notes. This can be centered, I don't care. La la la, li li li, lu lu lu. Again, a lot of this stuff, learning this stuff, teaching this stuff to myself, you just gotta resign yourself to the fact that it's not gonna go very fast. That's not to say that's not to say make it go slow or let it go slow when you have the option. But, you know, I build this stuff as fast as I can build it, you know, and if it's not very fast, well, that's just kind of, it is what it is. Like, I thought I was maybe a week away from finishing that project, but here we are. Story of my life, right? No, it's not that big a deal. Honestly, I don't really give a fuck. It's a clown world anyway, baby. Alright. So, let's describe this again. But the good news is, once I understand static site generators, from what I'm being told, it'll allow me to much more quickly put together what are basic. It's kind of a misleading name, static site generator, because you're still creating a dynamic site. It just puts it in a package that makes it work as quickly as would a basic HTML CSS site. It makes it that fast, even though it is dynamic. That's the thing. That's really that's the utility of it. Okay, if I'm understanding correctly. It makes a dynamic site, which is what this is on screen. Be as efficient and fail-proof as a static site. So it basically makes it seem like a static site, makes it operate like a static site, even though it is still dynamic. So yeah. Anyways. Let's not have 100 font, please. What's your guys' favorite font? Post it in the comments. I like Avenir. I don't know if that's how you say it, but Avenir. Ain't life grand. First there was static. Which just displays non-interactive stuff on screen. I don't have to be Shakespeare. Okay. These load very quickly, and there are not a lot of opportunities for failure, not a lot of fail points. Then, if I understand what he's saying, this is how I should think of it. Then JavaScript came along. Made websites dynamic by allowing for more user interactivity and calling to back-end databases based on user-provided instructions. What was I saying? Dynamic sites, however, are, I'll say above, allow for more points of failure and involve more processing. Hold on. Allow for more points of failure, which means more requiring more I'll just say maintenance and upkeep. And involve more processing, making the site slower, I guess. A static site generator Literally, this is what you have to do. I mean, I don't know any other way to do it. I can't just know this stuff in my head. I have to write it down. A static site generator basically takes what is a dynamic site, meaning involving server calls and things like that, and user provided inputs or data, whatever, and generates a site that dynamic site as if it were static, i.e. removing the points of failure. I'm not really sure here exactly how it does that, but I'll just say etc. I don't really know. Making it behave as a non-interactive static site would. Okay, whatever, that's good enough. I get the general gist of it. Let's keep watching.
Pictures. And, I wanted all sorts of things separated. That way I don't have to rewrite all my code, which is great. But this brings me to two major factors that can
Time
cripple
is
your
money.
website. And that's, the first one is speed.
Get real.
Now, in today's day and age, time is money. And when you're
Time's
trying
money.
to load a website,
Come on,
you
man.
have to wait more than 3 seconds, and you typically leave that website. I know I do personally. Now, why
Jesus
is this,
Christ
why is this a
said
big problem
time
with
is
this,
money.
with this setup, with this dynamic website? Well, every time that you have to build that web page, every time PHP has to go through these extensions and go through the database, that's adding more and more time. So that's just a huge factor of I don't want to be on that website because it adds more time. And with all these different parts in there, this brings me to my next big point, is there's lots of breaking points. The more points of exchange is the more points of breakage.
I can show you what
do I mean by this? Well, typically, your server doesn't have to have all of that stuff on it. And just because it does have all that stuff on it doesn't mean it's not being run by 3 separate entities. Your database could be running in SQLite, and your file system could be a big storage center, and your actual server is sitting someplace else. And if one thing goes down, all of it goes down. So the more points of failure is with every single system. So how do we get away from this? How do we solve this problem? Because we just haven't lived with this problem. We always solve problems, right? Well, this is where a couple things come in. And one of the biggest things was JavaScript. JavaScript changed the world, actually. It's a language that does the same stuff on the server, the same manipulating data and changing results and stuff like that it would do on the server, but it actually runs client-side, on your laptop, on your phone, on your desktop. Now, this is thanks to... For this, you can make your websites feel dynamic thanks to some frameworks called jQuery, Angular, React. Those are some really popular ones. There's thousands of them out there, but they're all built using JavaScript.
Okay.
And this makes your what was before your static sites very dynamic in the sense that while you're still writing all your code by hand, it's now very responsive. Things change, things update, all that stuff, right? Just using this JavaScript doesn't make the static part any less static. It just adds dynamic to the website.
Okay.
So what's going to...
So it's not like JavaScript makes it dynamic. So this is not actually true here. This is why I'm really trying to nail down what he's describing. So what does it mean? What does a dynamic site mean? What the fuck does that even mean? What does that mean exactly? A server side. Can I have some pop-ups, please? The difference between static and dynamite websites? Why does that say dynamite? Was that like a joke? Is content on static sites stays the same unless of a comparison. Information on dynamic websites shifts. Static sites are ideal for those looking to deploy pages in the shortest time possible. Doesn't require software, and you can copy the basic code throughout the platform for each page. Okay. However, dynamic websites provide more customization efforts. Interesting. Okay. I might have to do this first. What is Spire? I don't want to purchase your product. If this is all just a lead up to buy our product, then I don't want to read this. I mean, it may be a good explanation, but I'd rather just get... This is what YouTube is for. I don't like this guy's explanation too much because it doesn't really... Let's get a more defined answer for this. And I don't want an Indian dude to explain it to me either. Hello, friends. Hello, friends. Oh, a trick I learned. If you don't want to watch ads, just quickly go back and then quickly go forward again, and it totally removes the ad. You don't have to wait through one or wait for the skip button. Okay. See, like today's just gonna get totally I'm not building anything right now. Hello? I need like a more defined answer. I mean, I haven't found like a specific thing I can point to go like, okay, that's definitely dynamic and that's definitely static. Like a defining difference, in other words. They just kind of vaguely talk about... Oh, what the hell? I don't know how this works. Whatever. Okay.
Welcome to this video. What's the difference between static websites and dynamic websites? This is the question I'll answer in this video because I get it a lot and it's important to understand what the differences are and what they are actually not, because it's easy to get that wrong.
Hello, friends.
Let's have a look and dive into that.
Hello, my friends.
And for that, I prepared
I
a
am-
super simple project, a static and a dynamic folder. Let's have a
I
look
am
at the static page
Vladimir.
first. This is a static web page. Static web page means it consists of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Not necessarily all these things. You can just have HTML if you want, but definitely not more. And with JavaScript, I don't mean Node.js, I mean JavaScript that runs in the browser. This app here
Okay.
here, for example, if I double click my index.html file in the Mac Finder, looks like that. It has a button. If I click it, I see this text because in my code, this is the markup. I got this button here and I got this text, which is initially not visible. I got some CSS code styling everything, and the JavaScript code turns that paragraph to be visible by listening to a click on the button and then just changing the style of the paragraph to display block. Previously, it was display none. This is static, and it's also important to understand, obviously the page wasn't that static. Something changed on the page, right? So the page, when it runs, is kind of dynamic. We still have interactions there. We can listen to user events. We can change something on the page. Static simply means that it's not generated on the server. The HTML code we're getting, the JavaScript code we're getting.
Ah, it's not generated on the server. There we go. That's a real definition. Okay, let's write that down. Static. Okay. Can still be dynamic-esque, meaning parts are moved around. I don't know. That's the I know what dynamic means. Parts are moved around. Parts. What the fuck? Oh yeah, I want to do this on a file. How do you do that? File. I forget how you do this. Page numbers. Here we go. No. I don't remember how to do it now. Page setup. Pageless. Thank you. I wish you could still have margins, even though it's pageless, but whatever. Let's do it. I don't really understand that. Okay, fuck it. I don't understand why getting rid of the pages means you have to have it all shifted over, but whatever. Whatever. Say that one more time.
They change something on the page. We still have interactions there. We can listen to user events. We can change something on the page. Static simply means that it's not Not generated on the server.
Generated. Obviously, the difference. Oops. Okay, this makes this a little more clear. It's not just about dynamic, which is such a vague term. And so and we're learning and we're growing. I'm gonna get some more coffee. Is it cold today? Okay. It is generated on the server, so in other words, it's not manually written. It's not. What is displayed? Let me say it this way. What is displayed is not I don't know, whatever. And then I was gonna say like HTML, CSS, and JS. Well, let's listen to this guy. Let me finish. Only act as, I don't know, channels, server. Is that the right way to think of it?
The HTML code we're getting, the JavaScript code we're getting, and the CSS code we're getting is not generated dynamically. It's already there. It's hosted on a server, and it's lying there on the server in the version we as a user receive it. The user events, we can change something on the page. Static simply means that it's not generated on the server. The HTML code we're getting, the JavaScript code we're getting, and the CSS code we're getting is not generated dynamically. It's all
I guess I'll say store instead of generate. Generate is more of like a active process. This is really just like storing, like you write something on a piece of paper and put it over here. It's just being stored. It's not being like generated. I don't know.
already there. It's hosted on a server, and it's lying there on the server in the version we as a user receive it. The JavaScript code can then mess with the DOM and change things, but the input files we're getting, the raw source code files, are already pre-built, and
The
source code doesn't change with the next request we send. That's different for dynamic pages. I also got a dynamic page, which is only that server.js file. And if I send my request there, by simply running that with the node command, I installed Node.js on my machine, of course. I'll start the server running on localhost 3000, so let's visit that. And I get back some HTML, but if I reload it, you'll see that this random value always changes. Now, this is not done with JavaScript in the browser. Instead, if I inspect my HTML code here, or not here, but actually the page source, you see that the page source is this HTML code, and the value in there is hard-coded into that source code, so it's not changed dynamically at runtime. This happens because in
At
server
runtime, that's another concept. At runtime. Which means any dynamic changes occur at runtime, meaning all of the source code has already made it to the browser. That's the only thing about this font, you can't really see the bold very well. I'll underline it. Versus this means this is kind of like a different type of coding, but I don't know.
And you see that the page source is this HTML code, and the value in there is hard-coded into that source code, so it's not changed dynamically at runtime. This happens because in server.js, I return HTML code and I generate that value on the server. This means dynamically generated. The HTML code I get back from the server is not always the same. Every new request can yield a different page. Typically, you don't really use that to random. The HTML code I get back from the server is not always the same.
It's a very abstract concept. I mean, it's like you got to keep thinking about it until it makes sense.
Every new request can yield a different page. Typically, you don't really use that to randomly generate numbers, but maybe you send back a page where that shopping cart number in the top right corner was updated on the server, or you send back a new page when the user is logged in. So the HTML markup you get back adjusts dynamically on the server.
Like, the reason this is confusing is like somebody gave me an example, like a quiz. If I were a teacher, tell me whether this example is exemplifying a static website or a dynamic website. And this happens. Would I be able to answer those questions correctly? I think I would. I think I get it enough.
And of course, you can build one and the same thing in a dynamic way where you render it on the server, or in a static way where you have a pre-built HTML file, which is then changed by JavaScript on the browser in the client. So both is possible. So often you can use both to achieve the same result. But the important thing here is to understand what dynamic means. Things change on the server. A new request can yield a different file.
Okay.
Whereas static always means the files never change. They sit on the server and you always get this exact version. But what's better then? Especially when you...
I'll say markup here. Meaning all of the markup has already been, I mean, it's not really that it made it to the browser already, it's really that has already been built. I'll say it that way. That makes sense. It does make sense. I mean, that's my way to say it. I don't know if that's how it should be looked at, but whatever. I mean, okay.
Can build the same. Which one should you choose? Let's compare them. On a static page, we talk about HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and these files are not dynamically rendered on a server, but, and that's important, still served by a server, of course. Every
Right.
web page has.
So they're not dynamically rendered. That makes sense. Pages are or sorry, are dynamically. Okay, yeah, that's a good way to describe it.
To sit on a server when you reach it through a domain. But they're not dynamically generated. You always get the same set of pre-built files. The page content can.
You always get the same setup for.
changed though through JavaScript in the browser, not on the server. So static does not mean that the page never changes, it just means it's pre-built during development and not changed dynamically.
Okay.
On the server. Dynamic means that the content is generated through some server-side language like
Say that again.
Dynamic means that the content is generated through some server-side language.
The content is generated by a server-side language like Node.
Like PHP or Node.js in my experience.
Node.js. Or so what is so now my question is what is React? React is not a server-side language, right? Let's Google it. Is React static or dynamic? It's static, right? See, they keep throwing the word dynamic around, but it's still static. Yeah. Okay, yeah. Yeah, it's still, you don't necessarily need a static server to run. How is it possible that they are static? Okay, they're static. This is actually helping a lot because I've heard people talk about all these languages before and I really didn't understand what was meant by a lot of this stuff. So I'm learning, we're learning.
And that the return page is dynamically generated. So the server returns a
returns dynamically generated HTML page. Right. Pages are dynamically rendered. You could say other example languages, other static, React. React is one. Now what they wanted me to do was, where did their thing go? Hold on. They said, did they say anything else? No. Let me think. They're saying, so frameworks in general should be thought of as static, right? Static languages. Frameworks are static languages, correct? I think that's correct, yes. Frameworks word again. Static. Not see things like Node, that is not a framework. Is Node a framework? Watch. Is Node a framework? Is not a framework, correct. Is a JavaScript runtime environment. Framework, the word framework implies static. Okay. Whereas runtime environments are dynamic, meaning operate on a server. Interesting. So that's like a different type of coding altogether. The only coding I've been doing is static. Meaning like, please browser display this information. A whole different kind of coding, you're still going to display information on a browser, but you're basically putting together a script for a server to run that's not set in stone exactly how it will display. I mean, it is, but it's not. It's hard to describe. It's a script that basically takes information off a server and compiles it together based on a set of rules that you feed it, as opposed to well, no, maybe I'm wrong. Node.js frameworks. So framework does not imply front end. It just means I'm not really sure what a backend framework is. What is a backend framework? Is a backend framework a dynamic language? Back-end framework versus dynamic language. Is that something I can look up? Back-end framework versus what does that mean? I might need to stand up. as opposed to a dynamic. Yeah, as opposed to dynamic. Ass. I guess what I'm really asking is there's two different delineations. There's dynamic, there's static versus dynamic, and then there's front end versus back end. And, you know, Writing something in React. This is all just about understanding where I'm at. You know what they're going to respond to say? There's no such thing as a static language. Okay, well, it deals with static I wish this thing had underline. What the fuck? Like it gets to a point where it's like so abstract that it's hard to ever really nail down what you're talking about. I'm starting to get hungry. It's 11 o'clock. React, for example, just being a special type of JS is therefore not a server-side language. So it falls under the static category, okay? Since what is being generated right? So like where I am starting to get confused is about also this divide between front end and back end. So we just mentioned Node.js being a dynamic, meaning server oriented. Right, runtime environment. Okay, but I thought runtime implies browser side. Sheesh. I don't know what that means. They use all these words and like I don't know what any of them mean. Like I understand the core difference here. I need to eat. You see how fucking complicated this shit is? Yes, it's on the, oh, because I logged into Udemy, they're gonna send me a damn email.
Dynamically generated page. And that page is not necessarily always the same because the HTML code and also partly the JavaScript code even can be generated on the server. After being returned, you can of course still have JavaScript which changes something in the DOM, so that still is possible, but the server side
is not involved in page rendering. Page rendering. So, well, we gotta look that up then. What the fuck is a runtime environment? What is a runtime environment? I gotta eat. A runtime environment is an environment in which a program. It's the hardware or software instructions that supports the running of it. What does at runtime mean? What does at runtime mean? The term runtime has many meanings. So runtime, I guess, if you're running it, and it's and it's a browser side, then the runtime is browser side versus Dynamic runtime would be server side. Static runtime environment. So runtime environment could either be static. Runtime environment. So it's not really specific, I don't think, to server versus browser runtime environment. I need to eat. What a pretty day. Wow. Where's my phone? How beautiful nature is. Where's my phone? It's totally natural and normal to have a piece of technological hardware to always be holding and interacting with like a hyper condensed piece of technological hardware like that. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We should be doing that more. Let's always have this super contrived, super specific, very, very questionable. We don't really know whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. Let's always have that right here. And always be holding on to it like a fucking drugged out monkey. Because that's good for us. That's good for humanity. That's going to help us it's not going to stop us from breeding or talking to each other or being human toward one another or helping us survive as a fucking species. It's not going to affect any of that. It's not bad at all. Phones were the original vaccine. That's how I see it. Phones were the original vaccine. Everybody just signed up for it, no questions asked. Without ever considering that it might actually be detrimental. Why would it be detrimental? I want it. Therefore, it is good, and we should have it be intimately tied to our entire daily existence. All the time. Because why? Because it's there, because they presented it to us. That's good enough for me. It's been presented, so now you adopt it. And don't ask any questions. Don't question it. Just take it in. Like, is it not clear since phones came out how badly things have self-destructed? Anyways, we're all just like hermits now. People don't even talk to each other anymore. Everybody has very superficial ideas about what is based on what they read on their phones. Everything's just being poured into our brains through technology instead of being generated from the bottom up, from actual human interaction. But I'm just talking nonsense. I mean, I figure if I'm going to be watched by the government anyways, I might as well stream it on YouTube. I might as well let the whole public see what the government's looking at. Right? If the FBI wants a little piece, fuck it. They can watch YouTube. They don't have to secretly spy on me. They can just tune into my channel now. Just tune in, guys. Subscribe. Subscribe, FBI. Help me out. Anyways, what am I saying here? Maybe I'll get another answer here. Let me just read this from the top. Does something being a framework necessarily imply that it only has to do with static? Or how the server is not involved in page rendering. Now we're talking about rendering versus generating. He did say the server generates the page, right? Generates the HTML page. Okay. Rendering, but it's not rendering it. It's generating it in HTML, which is directly readable by a browser. So in what way is that not rendering? I don't really get that. Okay. It's like the more I think about it, the less I understand it. Or else is the server itself generating the files doesn't it serve them? Pages are dynamically rendered. Dynamically rendered. Generating. See, here he says it is generated. It returns a dynamically generated HTML page. Meaning the server generates the HTML page? Is that how I'm supposed to read that? The server generates the HTML page. He says that here. Earlier, this is a direct quote. He said, here he said, pages are dynamically rendered. And then here he's saying, is not involved in page rendering. Fucking fuck, man. I don't know what the fuck that means. He said it two different ways. I'm just gonna ask this question and see what they even say. A lot of this stuff is just like throw shit at them and see what they give you back. Or else is the server itself both generating the files and you see what you gotta do to just make a decent living? Like, in order to avoid being a slave, the stuff you have to try to fucking figure out. Like, you either have to be a genius, like, I don't know what. You have to be a doctor, a lawyer, or some just to be middle class, just to be able to afford a mortgage. Like, or in other words, just to avoid not just being a glorified machine, a beast of burden. If so, then it's a static website, or else is the server itself. Anyways, I don't know. I need to post something and then eat and then go to the gym. There's a static versus dynamic, which has to do with where the markup content is initially generated. By developer, static, versus by a server-side language on a server, dynamic. Or you could view it in terms of how the server is affecting the site. Is the server simply housing pre-made static files and then serving those files when they're called? If so, then it's a static website. Or else, otherwise, you would say, otherwise, if server itself both generates the files and serves them, that would make it a dynamic site, as far as I understand. That's probably a good enough definition. React, for example, I do need to eat, hold on. React, for example, just being a special type of JS is therefore not a server-side language. I hate this keyboard. If I'm correct so far, then um watching. Yeah, and then my confusion lies with if I'm off anywhere otherwise, I have an additional what is it called when you not delineate but divide, distinction. Node.js is not a language at all, actually. It's a runtime environment. It's not a language at all. React or I'm sorry, Node.js is called a JavaScript runtime environment. Now, what the fuck that means, I have no idea. randomly likes to hide. It thinks it's a link, but anyway. Let me take this away. Hold on. A runtime environment. Oh, good. I need to eat, maybe just eat something small. Go to the gym, come back, and have an actual lunch, and then get back on this fucking computer. Eventually, I'll understand all this stuff. All right, I'm gonna stop everything now.